Welcome back to all of you. I am so excited to chat with you today, particularly because I am going to be talking about the law of attraction and abundance, and in particular, how to attract the things that we want most in life, but that are also the best for us in life, as well as what abundance really means and how all of us possess way more abundance than we actually think. And so I've got a couple stories for you because, I've got stories in abundance, and hopefully you can relate to them, or if not, learn something from them, because my goal is always to reach you from a vulnerable place, because I don't believe that any change or positive things can happen unless, genuinely positive. I think that vulnerability is necessary for those things. And so if my stories and vulnerability can help you, I'm always more than happy to share. So first, let me just say I'm going to share a couple stories about the law of attraction, which I'll explain in a minute. And then I'll explain how all of that relates to this idea of abundance. But let me just say, when it comes to abundance, to just kind of define it really quickly, we all, I think, often think of money, right, and wealth when we think of abundance. And of course, we would all love that, right? I've got thousands of dollars of student loan debt and 6 kids, so I'd be all about some abundance of wealth right now, and more than happy to accept that should it come my way. However, I'm referring more in this episode to the abundance of gifts and values and potential that we have in ourselves. And ideally, if we tap into that and see how much abundance of values, skills, gifts, all of that we all already have, potentially it could lead to that wealth, right? Because the idea is if you are living, the best life for you, true to who you are and your values, ideally all those things will come. Maybe slowly, but they will. And so that's the abundance that I'm referring to, is the one that has more to do with the capacity you have within yourself. And I've got some stories that will hopefully really encourage you on that. But first, let me begin with the law of attraction. So the law of attraction is the very simple idea, basically stating that you attract the people and situations that directly correlate or match your own state of being. So like your thoughts and emotions. So for example, if you are really bitter and pissed off, you're most likely going to attract really bitter and pissed off people. Alternatively, if you are super kind, outgoing, well, not that you have to be outgoing to be kind, but you know what I mean. If you're really friendly, kind, generally sweet to the people you meet, you're going to attract those kinds of people. Now, we are all humans sharing one area, right? It doesn't mean that, and I know some of you might be thinking like, hey, I'm super nice and I've only attracted assholes. There's a lot there. Part of it could be, what's going on deeper. Like you might be nice, but think that you deserve, deep down, like you might think you deserve to be treated poorly. I've gone through that, right? Like we don't consciously think we deserve to be treated poorly, but through however we were raised or through the way that certain people have treated us, we kind of get lost in that and think we don't deserve, people who would love us right. So what I'm saying is it's possible to, end up with a mismatched situation. I get it. There's a lot of people in the world, but overall, it's kind of more think about like your lifestyle in general and who you spend the most time with and what you spend the most time doing. That's more where the law of attraction fits, not necessarily like, oh, you bumped into some cranky asshole at Target or, had a bad date. It's more like the law of attraction. What we attract to us is more like on a consistent basis. Okay, so again, if you are a genuinely kind and vulnerable person, you will most likely have friends who are that way too. Because think about it, if you're somebody who's pretty open and honest and truthful, you're not going to maintain a long-lasting friendship with somebody who's really superficial, fake, and just likes to gossip all the time. That's not really going to work, right? So I think you get it. I was thinking about this whole idea of the law of attraction and reflecting on my life because right now, what I'm trying to attract is fellow creatives, right? Like I love to create and I love creative things, not just writing, but I love painting. I love reading, other people's work. I love dancing. That's a creative art form. I mean, there's so many ways to be creative. I love creative entrepreneurs. All the podcasts I listen to, right? Like Jay Shetty, Ed Milet, Brene Brown. I would even call her a creative. I know she's a scientist, but she is creative in that she used, her passion and knowledge to build, new knowledge that we did not have before. And she has creative approaches to sharing that with people, which I think work very well. So I'm trying to attract other creatives as my friends. My husband is also a creative, and he's really creative with his comedy writing, but also just cinema. He's really good at analyzing films and all of the work that goes into it. He's very passionate about that kind of thing. So that's one thing that I'm trying to attract now. And in many ways, I'm successful, right? Like, my husband is a creative, so he feeds into my creativity and helps me to write bigger and better. And I can talk to him about his films that he enjoys, right? I also am taking this writing class, and I love sitting with, fellow writers, hearing their work, sharing my own work, talking with them. I can bond with them on a level that I maybe can't with other people. But I took steps to also join that writing course, right, to meet my husband. But that's what I was looking for, and that's what I found. My friend Cami, who was on here a couple weeks ago, to talk about that friendship for a minute with the law of attraction. I had known her in my dance class for maybe a year or so and chatted with her here and there, but it was enough conversations to know that we had quite a bit in common. We were both teachers. We could understand the world of what educators go through, but we also both loved to read and loved to study and had studied similar things in school. And obviously we both loved to dance too. So one day she finally asked me, hey, you want to hang out sometime, get some coffee? And that was so exciting. And I discovered through, talking more with her that she could talk on a deeper level. And let me just say, that was kind of how we ended up getting coffee is, once the dance class is over, you can chat with people here and there, a little bit before you go home. And through just having all these mini conversations, we discovered we both could go a little bit deeper. And when I say deeper, I mean talk about real things, go beyond gossip, go beyond just, oh yeah, that was a fun class, we could talk about real things. And sure enough, as we sat down together, we could go deep, and we both liked that. It doesn't mean we're exactly the same. Cami has moved all over the US, which I think is really cool. And she doesn't have kids, and she just got her PhD. As you know, I have a ton of kids, and I don't have my PhD, not yet anyway. And our lives are not, I bring that up to say, our lives are not identical. The law of attraction doesn't mean you attract someone who's just like you. It just means you attract somebody who shares your values. So, quick pause before I jump into a story from my past, because I wasn't always in such a great place with my friendships and my romantic relationship. It really helps to start with knowing what you value. Jay Shetty talks about that a lot. He talks about that in his 8 Rules of Love book. He talks about that in his Think Like a Monk book, and he talks about it on his podcast all the time. So the best way to start a healthy romantic relationship, or even a healthy friendship, or to decide if maybe you need to walk away from some, is to first know what you value. And values aren't necessarily like money or my car or my phone. Those are things, right? Values are like virtues. So things like creativity, loyalty, independence, adventure, kindness, justice, things like that. So kind of, and you can easily Google lists of values and they'll pop up. So if you genuinely don't know, I would encourage you to look this up. I actually had my students do this because it's so valuable. Knowing what you value is huge for deciding what companies you want to work for deciding a romantic partner, friendships. I mean, knowing who you are and what you value and being able to define that really, really clarifies the right path when it comes to dating, job, even family, and who you choose to spend your time around and not. It really is clarifying. So when I'm talking about the law of attraction, I'm talking about values. And for example, my husband and I, we both value creativity. Cami and I both value intellectual things, right? We like talking about the kinds of things that you would study at college. Physical exercise, that's something Cami and I both valued, moving our bodies through dance. And so just figuring that out will help you with the law of attraction and figuring out what you value. And by the way to tell what somebody else values is just to listen to what they talk about, right? You find out pretty quickly on a first date or even a first coffee date with a friend what people value based on what they say. And so just listen closely when people talk and you'll get a sense of what matters the most to them. So that's my advice in terms of the law of attraction for attracting the kind of people you want to be around, is to first identify what it is that you value. And in addition to Googling like the lists, another suggestion is just to think about like what brings you joy. Where do you get the most energy? Where do you feel the most connected? And for me, I feel the most connected to myself and, the world, I guess, when I write. And that's where that creativity piece comes. I've always loved to travel. I've loved to go places I've never been before. That's my sense of adventure. And so whatever it is that brings you joy or that you want more of or gives you energy, chances are that's directly related to your values. So think about that. Okay. So let me kind of go back to a time when I maybe wasn't so happy, when I was not aligned with, when I was not attracting the kinds of people that I really needed. And I think sometimes when we reflect on our past, right, like we reflect on times that were very painful for us or maybe even times that we're ashamed of, it's easy to think I had nothing. This is going to get really dark, but I need to say it because it's the reality of how I've felt at times. I was a waste of a human life. I can't believe I did this, this, and this, and I was just awful. And I think many of us have felt like that before, right? We've had really low times in our life where maybe things didn't work out or we made some mistakes that we really, really regret. As I was thinking about this whole idea of the law of attraction and abundance, right? And having abundance means that you have more than enough of what you need. Endless supplies of whatever it is that you need, whether that is love, wealth, creativity. That's abundance. And I think back to my lowest times and where I thought I had nothing, where I thought I was a waste. And as I went deeper, as I was contemplating this whole law of attraction abundance thing, I realized even during my lowest times or the times that I'm not proud of, I actually was still attracting what I was looking for. And I'll explain how all of that translates into abundance. So let me clarify a little bit. Human beings are deep. We are complicated, right? We can feel many things at once. And so in particular, I want to go back to, it would have been about the year 2010, okay? I had just graduated college and I was starting grad school. And as I've shared with you, I had felt like a failure when I graduated college, even though I was extremely successful academically and got right into grad school. I felt like a failure in my romantic relationships because, as I shared, there was a lot of pressure to meet the one at college and get married and have this happy little Christian life, right? Well, no matter how hard I tried, I failed. And when I and I didn't really fail, but that's how I saw it, right? I had 2 serious relationships in college that didn't work out. And I was kind of heartbroken over them. And when I started grad school, I was kind of entering a rebellious phase. both when it came to romance, but also when it came to the Christian values that were starting to just feel like they didn't really align with me. And so I was in a place where when I started grad school, I met some really great friends who invited me out to bars, right? Where we would dance, and drinking and dancing and the bar scene was not something I was raised with or something that was encouraged in college. Like in my college, if you were caught drinking, there would be a whole panel and you could potentially be kicked out of school. Okay. So drinking was really taboo. But I met these friends, I started enjoying wine and dancing, and it was super, super fun. And I know that this might, to some of you, sound like, okay, this is typical 20s, what's the big deal? It was a big deal for me, and it was rebellious for me, because like I said, alcohol was a no-no when I was raised, and also a no-no in college. I did not drink in college. And so when I discovered that I could have fun at bars with my friends, drinking and dancing, I was like, okay. But it felt really rebellious to me because it was not, it went against, how I was supposed to live my life. And as I was going out with my friends, it was like I kind of was tired of Christian dudes also because, there would be this front that they were these good guys, but the two that I dated in college did not treat me well, and so I was kind of tired of the bullshit, that can sometimes go along with masks that people wear when they're religious. And I wanted to date someone who was a little bit more just, well, I don't want to say the bad boy because I don't want to sound like, the stereotypical woman in a cheap ass movie. But I guess there's no other way that I really know how to describe it. I wanted to date somebody who was also maybe more rebellious or maybe more out in the open, almost even crass, somebody who wasn't afraid to swear, somebody who wasn't afraid to just be a little bit more wild. And that's when I met this guy who would end up being my daughter's father, and it was a really not good situation. But when I first met him at a bar, he was muscular and charming and fun, and we danced together, and shortly after dating him, like for a couple weeks, I could see, okay, this is not who I actually want to be with. And I say that, and I know that this is gonna sound kind of weird, but I'm gonna share this with you because I think it might potentially help you with your dating situations. I was riding in the car with him shortly after we started dating, after I met him at this bar, and he was with this cousin, and they were kind of like smoking their cigarettes, right? And we're talking about 21-year-old dudes, okay? So that should tell you something. They're smoking their cigarettes out the car, and just kind of just kind of joyriding with me in the back seat. Also, why was I in the back seat? They probably should have had me sit in the front, but whatever. That's a whole other thing. So they're kind of joyriding, smoking, just thinking they're the shit, And my ex-boyfriend finished like his Coke or whatever he was drinking, like the can of whatever it was, and just threw it out the window. And I was 22 years old at the time, and I remember thinking, oh my God, what a fucking slob. Who just throws their can out the window? What am I doing? And I actually asked myself, what am I doing? And I knew, even at 22 years old, I knew this is not it. And let me just tell you, if somebody throws a can out the window, they don't have a whole lot of respect for things, right? Like if you're not going to respect the earth or whoever might be driving behind you, you're not going to respect me. So even something that might seem as simple as littering actually says quite a bit about a person. You want to talk about values? Throwing your can out the window, that shows a lack of respect, that you perhaps don't value respect. And lo and behold, that relationship went on to become abusive. But when I think about that time, something else happened a few weeks into dating him. And again, I liked him because he was sort of muscular. Well, I keep bringing up the muscles. Like, yeah, I was 22 and I liked the muscles, but he was rebellious. He was fun. He was charming. Like he had this sense of humor. And in a sense, that's what I wanted. I wanted somebody who was very open with who they were from the start. And to his credit, he didn't try to hide who he was. He was, this littering, charming, goofy dude. So in a sense, I did attract what I wanted, just not what I actually wanted deep down. I attracted something that I wanted in this rebellious phase of my life. But something interesting that happened a few weeks into dating him, I was actually out at the same bar with my friends dancing. And that night, he wasn't with me that night. I was just with my friends. And I was wearing this kind of like this sort of satiny short white dress. It was like not your typical kind of clubbing outfit. It was a little bit, it worked, but it was a little bit more formal. And I kind of just wanted to do that. I wanted to just feel a little fancy for some reason. And I had been dancing with my friends, hanging with my friends, whatever. And then right at bar close, this guy comes up to me and he says, "You are really lovely. I've been watching you, not in a creepy way, but I've been watching you dance with your friends, and you just kind of glow. And I've been trying to get the courage to come up to you the whole night, and I know the bar's about to close, but I couldn't let you leave here without giving you my number, and please call me if you want, but no pressure. I had to tell you how lovely I think you are, and I would love to get coffee with you sometime if you're up for it. So here's my number." And I think his name was Abe. And I remember feeling kind of wonderstruck in that moment. All of us want to be seen. It feels really good to be noticed and asked out. And we all also kind of have a vibe about when someone's just being creepy and when someone's being genuine. And although I was a couple glasses of wine in at bar close, I knew this guy was being genuine. I knew he wasn't creepy. He wasn't stalking me or anything. I think he meant genuinely everything that he said, which was that I was lovely, that he noticed me, that something about me stood out. And the other reason I know he wasn't super creepy is because he gave me the choice to call him by giving me his number. He didn't pressure me into asking for mine. He gave me his so that it was on my terms. And wouldn't you know, my dumb ass never called him because I was a couple weeks into this thing with my rebellious fucknut, you know what I mean? And I just, I in my head thought, oh, I'm already, I got this thing going on. And by then it had kind of also begun to become a little bit controlling and abusive. And so I was falling into that trap a little bit. And so, I never called him. And now, I'm very happy in my marriage. I don't think about, I'm not pining over this guy wondering what could have been. The point of me telling this story is when I was 22, I wish I would have called him. Because even as I had attracted this rebellious, charming guy, there was still this part of me that wanted something deeper, wanted something real, and that wanted to be noticed for my essence, my glow, my soul, which I think this guy caught a glimpse of, this Abe guy. And I did attract that, even as I was stepping into something that maybe wasn't so good for me. And so, then I made the choice not to pursue it, but I would like to believe that, that was a part of me that was seeking something healthy. Because when it came to being deep, I never was a superficial person. I never was a fake person, ever. I always loved thinking deeply and creatively. But the problem when I was younger is I thought that because I didn't like the religious ways that I was taught to think deeply, that I just really couldn't think deeply at all. And so I kind of, as I was sort of rejecting this religious piece, I was rejecting that part of myself. But I bring this up to say that I look back at that time when I first met, my daughter's father, and I think, oh, I was such a fool. Why did I do that? What was I thinking? And in a sense, it's like, well, no, there was a part of me that was looking for that, and I got that. And I bring this up to say, we often have more control, even in some of the most embarrassing or low points of our life. We have more control than we think we do. And this was a time in my life where I was very lost, but even as I was lost, I was attracting something I was looking for. And this is where the abundance piece comes in. The deeper part of me, the part of me that was still very much alive and sparking, even after this sort of religious pain and rebellious actions, that deeper part of me that wanted more was still alive. And it was still saying, hey, Jenna, no, attract people who call you lovely, not people who call you babe. Good God. So I want that to be a message of encouragement to you, that even when you think you're lost or you are lost, there are still very powerful parts of you that are attracting, something that you're looking for. But you also can trust your gut. You can trust your subconscious. You can trust your soul to tell you, even if you do attract something that you're looking for, if it's not the right thing, that abundance of your soul will tell you, will give you a clue, and sometimes will even offer you an alternative of, hey, here's something else. Go after this. It'll be better for you. Now let me shift fully to this abundance piece, right? And I bring it up to say that what I've learned about the law of attraction is if we want to attract abundance, we have to be abundance, right? So whatever it is that you want, whether you want genuine love, whether you want to improve your communication skills or you want to get promoted at work, you have to become the thing that you want to attract first. So if you want to have a genuine healthy relationship, become a genuine healthy person. If you want to improve your communication skill or somebody who communicates well, work on your own communication skills, right? And you will sort of naturally attract that. But the good news is we don't have to do this perfectly. And I want to share with you something that I wrote, actually. And when I looked at the date on this, it was only... Sorry, it takes me a second to count. 4 months before I met my husband, okay, that I wrote this. And it's a very short poem that I want to share with you because I wrote this poem before I was even a more established writer. And this is the other place where abundance comes in, is that even during our most lost moments, we still have an abundance of the thing that makes us us. We just have to tap into it. Okay? And for me, that's creativity. So several months before I met my husband, not several, 4, I was kind of at the tail end of the dating roster, right? We know what that is. It's this sort of societal pressure to not just have one love interest that you're looking at, but to have 4 or 5 or even maybe more. Like, oh yeah, I'm getting coffee with this guy and then this guy's coming over to help me put together my whatever, and then this guy and I are going to go here, and vice versa for whoever it is that you love or are attracted to. And I think there's nothing wrong with dating and getting to know different people. That's I think that's healthy. But I think the roster has a lot of flaws, like this sort of pressure to have multiple people who you're seeing for different things that fulfill quote unquote different needs. I don't think humans work that way. I don't think we can compartmentalize things. And it certainly did not work for me to do this. And so I was kind of on the tail end of this. And I was really lonely and really sad and really just depressed, as you'll kind of hear in this poem. So let me just read it to you briefly. And all of this relates to the abundance that I was trying to attract. So this poem is called Insides Out. Is there no one with whom my soul aligns, an adventurer who could see inside my heart and mind, someone brave enough to know their own insides out, unafraid to explore creeping doubts? Does such a soul exist? They should, shouldn't they? Or else why would I ache so deeply to be known? How cruel is this world? All my life I've planted seeds that will never know a healthy harvest. I ache to be known and truly know another. One who sees. One who is not afraid to be someone more. Someone original. Someone brave. Only the crazy capture my eyes and attention now. If they cannot hold their sanity, at least they wear their insides out. Whew. And I wrote that just a few months before I met my husband. Now, he's not crazy, okay? But this poem was written from a place, as you can hear, of just devastation. Now, this is on the other side of all the things that I've already shared with you, right? Like failed marriages, losing my home. And there was a line that said, I've been planting these seeds that will never know a healthy harvest. That was my heart thinking, I've tried to live my best life for so long, and I feel like I keep getting handed shit. And although this poem was written from a place of loneliness, it was also a way of me calling out. I'm asking, is there anybody whose soul will align with mine, who will just go deeper? And then 4 months later, I meet the man who changed my life forever. And I would like to believe that my writing that poem, even though it came from a place of loneliness, fits with the law of attraction. I was sad, I was lonely, I was calling for something deeper. And I found somebody who would go deeper with me. So when you're thinking about this law of attraction, you don't have to live it perfectly. And sometimes, and when you look at your past and you look at your quote unquote mistakes, number one, realize that even when you made a mistake, you had more control than you thought you would. Maybe there was a part of you that needed that particular thing at first, just like I needed to be rebellious, but it didn't serve me long term. I maybe needed to be rebellious, so I attracted that in return, but it wasn't where my life path needed to go. So even when you were lost, you still attracted the thing that you needed at the time. But where this abundance piece comes in is that it's not as if you run out of love just because you love the wrong people. I've had a lot of unhealthy relationships. But when I finally met the right person, also, like I've been working on myself too, it wasn't like I didn't have the capacity to love him anymore. It wasn't like it ran out. It grew. Because I finally was with somebody who saw me and who I could see in return. Even though I spent my life sometimes maybe partying and putting my energy into a dating roster rather than my creative pursuits, it wasn't like I lost my ability to be creative. Even as I was pouring my energy into all these dates and dating that were not good for me, I was still writing poetry. I was still working on my book. I still had this abundance of creativity inside of me. I just needed to learn how to balance my energy better. So I want to encourage you, when it comes to abundance, take a look inward and see how abundant you actually are. You have so many beautiful gifts that you can grow. You have so many skills. And even look at some of the worst parts of your life, there we go, and think about, what did you learn from that? And how can you use the abundance of resilience that you built from those things to serve you and serve others now? You will never run out of the beautiful things that make you you, even if you're lost for a little while. There's always a spark inside calling you back. And really, it's just about getting things in balance. I didn't run out of creativity, even when I was putting my energy into these bad dates. It's just that once I finally met someone who supported that value, I put more energy into my creativity and I saw even more of an abundance. I was able to write even more, not just occasionally. I was doing it every chance I got. So as I close this out, again, I just want to encourage you to look at yourself, figure out what you value, and know that you have that in abundance. And even if you messed up, even if you're even lost now, you have not fully lost yourself. There is a spark inside that will grow into flames of abundance. See all the ways that you have creativity, loyalty, love, respect, and abundance, and start owning those things, appreciating those things about yourself, and you will attract that to you. I promise that you will. I'm so grateful that you are here with me today. And again, I hope that my stories encouraged you to believe that you are worthy of abundance too. You are worthy of attracting the love and respect and communication that you deserve. And once again, I also want to say to you, thanks for coming.